So I'm going to talk about the main function, but in a kind of roundabout way, trying to cover all of the other bases that I want to cover. So if you look at this program here, I ask you to enter in first number, second number, and then what I want it to do is I wanted to add up all the numbers from the first number to the second number. So if it was 4 and 6, then the answer would be 4 plus 5 plus 6, which would be what is it? 9, 15, right? Okay, so then how do I do that? I need to use a for loop, and then I'm going to use range num1 to num2, and if I go ahead and print out I, well, I is going to be set equal to num1, the 4, and then it's going to print out 4. We'll kind of come back up. I is going to increment to 5. It's going to print out 5. I is going to increment to 6, and 6 is not less than 6, so it would break. Right, so let me go and try that. So I'm entering in the 4, and I'm entering a 6 for the second number, and it prints out 4, 5. Right. Now I want to add I every iteration of the for loop, so I also want to include the 6. So how do I do that? I'm going to add 1 to the second number. I'll add 4 and I'll do 6, and now it prints out the 6. Okay, so I'm ready to go, and now I want to add up all the numbers, and the way I do that is I need to use an accumulator variable, right? So I'm going to call it maybe sum, and I'll set sum equal to 0 in the beginning because that's what I want it to be, and I'll say sum is equal to sum plus I, right? So then the first iteration of the for loop is going to do 0 plus 1. I'm sorry, 0 plus 4, so that's going to equal 4, and sum is going to equal 4. The next iteration, I is going to increment to 5, and it's going to be 4 plus 5, which is 9. So sum is going to be equal to 9. We come back up in, I is going to increment to 6, and it's going to be 9 plus 6, which is 15, and sum is going to equal 15. And then at the end of it all, I could simply print sum. And that should work, right? So let's hit save, run. I'll hit a 4 and a 6, and it prints out 15. Okay, so our program works the way it works using an accumulator variable whose characteristic, if you're not aware, is that you have the same variable on both sides of the equal sign, and then the amount that you are adding or subtracting here is how much you're counting by on each iteration of the loop. Okay, so now what about if I wanted this to become a function, right, where I give it the first and the second number, it returns back the answer. Okay, so how would I do that? Well, I would call the function, what am I going to call it? Maybe I could say range num, right? And range num is going to need these two values, so num underscore 1 and num underscore 2. And so now I need to define range num, so I come up here and I say def range num, and I give it the num1 and I give it num2. Notice here that this temporary variable n1 and n2 that's being created for the range num function does not need to be the same variable name as what is being passed to the range num through the function call on line 7, right? So what happened, well, let me go ahead and keep finishing and then I'll kind of sum it all up, but we're going to copy this code here. I'm going to put it into range num, and here we're not using num1 or num2, we're using n1 and n2, and then we got sum I. Okay, so then this like calculates the answer, right? And the answer is in sum, and at the end we want to return the answer back to the main program, so we're going to return the variable sum. Since we're returning the variable sum, range num is going to be replaced with the answer, basically. So we need to save that answer, right? So we can say like sum or answer is equal to range num. We're going to delete all this and we can print out answer, right? So let's go ahead and try that. I'll run. Ooh, line 1 is bad. Okay, so I'm missing my semicolon or my colon. I'll hit run. I'll hit 4 and 6, and I get the same answer, 15. Okay, so let's go ahead and run through the control flow of the program. We run the program. The compiler, the interpreter in the case of Python, ignores the function definition, so ignore. We run line 6, there's nothing there. We run line 7, we enter a number in. We run line 8, we enter a number in. And then we run line 9, nothing there. We run line 10, we're trying to put a value into the variable answer. But the expression on the right side is not a constant, right? It's not a value. It is a function call. So we're going to run this function called range num, right? And not only are we going to run it, but we're also going to pass it num1 and num2, right? Those two values, the 4 and the 6. So then from this line 10 here, we need to evaluate the right side. So it's going to jump up to line 1. N1 is going to be equal to 4 because num1 is equal to 4. And then N2 is going to equal to 6 because num2 is equal to 6. So you want to notice here that the actual variable is not being passed to the function definition, right? The value that's inside of the variable is being passed. So the 4 is being passed. The 6 is being passed over here. Not num1, not num2, okay? So then when we're over here on line 1, range num has these two temporary variables that are created, n1 and n2, and they receive those values. So n1 is equal to 4, n2 is equal to 6. We come inside, we do the magic, it figures out the answer, and then we get to line 5 where we return sum, right? Return to where the function was called, right? And where was the function called? It was called right here on line 10. Okay. So then when we return sum, we're not returning the variable, we are returning the value that is in sum, the 15, right? So when we come back here, it's as if you replace the function call with the value 15. Answer is equal to 15, and we print out 15. All right. One thing that you could do is instead of have this answer variable, you could simply run range num inside the print argument, right? So then it's going to come down to line 10. It's going to say, oh, I got to print this out, but that's expression. I need to evaluate it. So it's going to jump up here to line number 1. It's going to run the math, and then it's going to return the answer 15. This is going to be replaced with 15, and it's going to print 15, right? I'm going to go ahead and run that to prove that that's the case. I do 4 and 6, and it prints out 15. Okay, great. So we should be good with all of that. And the last thing I want to talk about is the main function. So we went over the main function in the book, but it wasn't like explicitly gone over. And so what is the main function? It is what I should see in all of your programs moving forward from this point on. And so if you open up any Python file, any Python program, you're going to see main at the very bottom of the file. Okay, and so we're going to def main, and we're going to put all of our program into main, and we are going to run main at the bottom like that. So what we have here is a rearrangement of the code that we had previously. Okay, it's the same instructions run in the same order, it's just rearranged. And you're going to see that as a constant theme throughout this class, is that we're going to have the same code running in the same order, but just the arrangement is going to be different. Okay, so this is the first step. The next step, we're going to learn about objects and classes, but we don't need to talk about that at the moment. So we run our code here, and what is the interpreter going to do? It's going to ignore the function definitions. It's going to come down to line 12. There's nothing there. It's going to do line 13. There's a call to main as the only line of code that's run, right? And then it's going to jump up here to line 7. It's going to run our program. It's going to go here to line 11. It's going to need to run range num, so it jumps up to line 1, 2, does all this stuff. We get to the return sum, right? Returns to where the function was called, so it's going to jump down here to line 11, print out the 15. That's the end of main, right? We're here at after we finish line 11, it's the end of main. So what happens when you get to the end of a function? It goes back to where that function was called. So we jump down to line 13, and there's nothing left, so the program ends. All right, so that's the control flow. It's just a rearrangement. We want to definitely use main in our programs. So this should be at the bottom of every program, and then every function that is called should be listed, or its definition should be listed above the main definition. Okay, so it's like reverse chronological is the way I like to say it, where you have the most recent, or I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to describe it, but you want main at the bottom, and you want all other functions as they are called in your main to be listed above main. Yeah, and I guess that's all I want to go over.